Good day. How's everyone doing? I'm doing great. It's a beautiful sunshiny morning, and we came into the studio, and I figured I would do a yoga core class for everyone today. Um, it's not going to be a super hardcore one. We're going to focus a little bit more on just bringing that attention in towards ourselves. And to be quite honest, I have not been practicing my core stuff, so forgive me if, yeah. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of us haven't been practicing our core stuff as much as we have in the past. And you know what? That's okay. Things are a little bit interesting right now, and it's all right to be exploring, let's say, some other areas of life, maybe off the mat, um, as we all get through these strange times together, but isolated. Anyway, yeah, so yoga core. I'm going to take you guys through the basic stuff that I teach in the class, that dynamic neuromuscular stabilization type stuff, based on watching babies and toddlers learn how to use their midsection. There's a lot of things that we do as we get older, compensation patterns and things like that, that can affect the natural way that we use the muscles to stabilize our spine. And when I'm talking core, we're working all the way from the neck right down to the pelvic floor, using all of the muscles in between to help stabilize the spine. So for those of you that are familiar with this, it will be a nice little review. For those of you that are new to this, it'll be a really good way to start learning how to use these muscles that stabilize the spine. And when the trunk is doing the job of the trunk, the shoulders, the hips, they can do the jobs that they're supposed to do as well. And we can learn to get away from compensation patterns. So even though this is core work, it's also very beneficial for the big joints that attach to the trunk. From an energetic standpoint, we will be kind of working all the way up the chakras, using a lot of the energies that travel all the way up the spine, and particularly that solar plexus guy, that one that's all about our mental power, our willpower. And willpower doesn't necessarily mean, getting everything done, or pushing ourselves to work really hard. Sometimes willpower is best used to help hold yourself back just a little bit, to understand what it is you really need to be doing in these moments. To let yourself rest just a little bit more. Sometimes it takes willpower to allow that to happen and not to keep pushing ourselves. So for those of you that have been, resting a whole lot at this time, I hope you're able to enjoy that. And for those of you that are hard at work during this time, number one, thank you for supporting the rest of us. And number two, I hope you can find the willpower to give yourself a little bit of a break when, at the end of the day, if all you can manage to do is just rest. That's okay. You probably need it. You probably need it. All right, and with that said, I'm going to ask you guys to come down on your back. You can have a little blanket or a little pillow underneath you. If you want to be in a supported Shavasana or supported corpse pose, you can do that as well. And I'm just going to grab my little bolster. So coming down on the back, and we're going to do a decent amount of breath work today as well. It'll be primarily just a learning about the position and using our breath to really understand how our core works. Everyone's a little bit different. We'll talk about that in just a bit. All right. Sit down on the back, maybe with a little bit of a pillow to support that neck, maybe not, whatever feels best for you. And we'll just start by taking a few deep breaths. Maybe 3 of those nice sighing breaths, in through the nose and out through the mouth, something like this. And then bringing your focus back to a more normal breath. Really letting that body sink down into the floor. Letting those arms get heavy. Letting those legs get heavy. And then as you are breathing, I'm going to encourage you to pay attention to bringing that breath down the back of the body. So as we breathe, we can often feel the rise and fall of our belly, maybe the rise and fall of the chest. But we also want to pay attention to bringing that breath through the back, so expanding the back of the lungs, maybe feeling that expansion happening a little bit more in the upper back area. Imagining we can feel those lungs expanding down into our kidney area. And then feeling those lungs expanding down to the back of the waist, the low back, maybe even all the way into the top of the pelvis. And even imagining you can bring that breath all the way through the back of the torso, right down into those sit bones as well. Now your belly and your chest, they will still move. There will still be expansion through the front. We're just encouraging a little bit more of that expansion into the back body, out through the sides of the ribs. Imagining our torso is like a balloon and it's filling up in 3-dimensional space. Not forcing it. I like to use the word coaxing. We're encouraging that breath to come through the back body just a little bit more. And this will be important as we get into more of the core type stuff, because we will be using some of the muscles in the front. We want to make sure that diaphragm still has space to move. We want to make sure those lungs can still fill up. So a couple more moments. Expanding that natural breath through the back body. Maybe feeling the spine soften and relax just a little bit more. And then we're going to keep that breath active through the back of the body as we start to set the stage for using the core for when we get up into our next position here. So there are a couple elements we want to think about. And I encourage you to pick one or two of these elements to really give good focus to as we get further on into the session today, into the practice. They're all important, but it's sometimes hard to pay attention to each and every element. So if there's one or two that really stand out and they're easy for you to engage or easy for you to feel, pay attention to those. Conversely, if you're fairly practiced with this stuff, maybe pay attention to the one that's a little bit more of a challenge for you to maintain as we get into the practice. But to start, we'll go through the stages of properly supporting the core, and we're going to start right down with the pelvic floor. So we want to feel that kind of lifting, that sort of holding it in sensation. So like we're holding in a P. It's a pulling in and a lifting up of the pelvic floor. And we don't want it to be super, super tight. We're not doing Kegels here, but what we're doing is just activating those muscles about 20 to 30% of your maximal force. And if that's hard to get, if they're kind of all the way on and really tight or all the way off, that's okay. Just practice getting used to feeling and using those muscles, even if they're not able to maintain that contraction for a long period of time. When you notice them relaxing, just take a breath and then pull them back up. And if you're engaging just those pelvic floor muscles, your legs should be nice and soft, nice and relaxed. No tension in the hips, no tension in the buttocks or low back. Just that lifting of the pelvic floor. And then we'll try to maintain that lift of the pelvic floor, still breathing down through the back of the body. Then I'll get you to take your hands and kind of press them into the sides of the waist, just in between the bottom of the ribs and the top of the pelvis, pushing those fingers in, and we want to engage our oblique muscles like we're trying to push those fingers away, out and away. So not too far into the back here, but we want kind of on the side, maybe a little bit on the front, right about here. We want to feel those muscles flaring out. Now still keeping that lift from the pelvic floor and that nice little flaring out through these guys here. Still breathing. Still breathing through that back of the body. And if these muscles are engaged, these guys should be relatively soft. That rise and fall of the belly should still happen. Shoulders should be relaxed. Neck and face nice and soft. Just that lift and pushing out. And keep that breath flowing. Then the next stage, coming up to that solar plexus. So you'll notice we've engaged that root chakra, that sacral chakra, and now we're getting into that solar plexus chakra. So we don't want to think of us sucking it in. We're not pulling belly button to the backbone. But what I'm doing, maybe you can see if I move my arm here, what I'm doing is pulling the base of my rib cage down towards the floor. And what that's going to do is kind of flatten out my lower back. So as everything is relaxed, I can kind of stick my hand right through here. And as I engage that pelvic floor, the sides of the waist, and pull those ribs down, my lower back is going to get nice and flat to the floor. Now it's not because I'm doing a pelvic tilt, using my legs or my buttocks or anything like that. It's because I'm tilting that rib cage down, which is helping to lengthen out that lower back, helping to flatten it out a little bit. If you have your legs straight out, not bent or not on a bolster, you may not get super flat, and that's okay. But you should notice that lower spine coming a little closer to your mat. So again, pelvic floor lifted, sides of the waist pressing out, and those ribs pulled down. Engaging that abdominal wall. And still breathing into the back of the body. And so our next step, coming up towards the heart, we're thinking about our shoulder blades being nice and wide on our mat, and those shoulders pulled down and away from the ears just a little bit. So not cranked all the way down with all of your might, but pulled down a bit and thinking of that collarbone being really nice and wide. Lots of space in that upper body. Pelvic floor, sides of the waist, rib cage pulled down, shoulders wide, pulled down away from the ears. Still breathing through that back body. Three-dimensional breath through that torso, even though we're holding all of these elements together. And then finally we come up into that throat chakra. We're going to tuck the chin down a little bit, not towards the collarbone too much, but pulling it down and almost thinking about pulling that chin back towards the back of the neck. And this is where I sometimes find that little pillow helps. A lot of us can be tight in the upper body, and when we start to get everything nice and flat through here, we're in a position like this, and we don't want this so much. We want that chin pulled down, and then finally, thinking of that string atop of that head, making everything nice and long. So we lift, we push out through the sides of the waist, we tilt those front ribs down towards the floor, towards our spine. We pull our shoulders down, make them nice and wide, and we get that little tuck of the chin and that length through the crown of the head. And at this moment, I can definitely tell that I have not been doing these exercises on a regular basis. It's hard work, okay? It is a little bit challenging. 5 more breaths, holding all of those elements together. Don't forget the pelvic floor. That's the part that always lets go for me. And after those 5 breaths, let it all go for a little bit. Maybe take a moment and pull those legs up into the chest, roll that spine a little bit. Or if you prefer, maybe you're the type that likes to stretch everything right out. Excuse me. We had a lot of incense going in here. Lots of sage this morning. So take a break. Let that mind relax from all of that control. Let that body relax for just a moment. If you want to do something like coming up, getting into a little child's pose for a moment, move that body around if you need to. And then we'll come back down and get through a little bit of work to bring our bodies up into what they call the 3-month position. 3. So what we're going to do here is engaging all of that same stuff. Pelvic floor lifted, waist wide, ribs pulled down. And though it's all important for me, for my particular body, keeping those ribs pulled down is what seems to make the most difference for me when I'm engaging my core. Some people may find flaring out the sides of the waist, that kind of puffing out of those muscles here helps. Some people might find really working and keeping that neck long makes a difference. But for me, the most important is pulling those ribs down towards the floor. Shoulders away from the ears, chin tucked, neck nice and long. And then we're going to bring the legs up almost in a little kind of bound angle pose. I still have some space between my feet. They're not quite touching, but they're angled in, and my knees are angled out. And in this position, I should definitely feel a nice flat lower back. Nice and wide through those shoulders. Nice and long through that neck. Then I'm going to reach my arms towards the sky, but not so that my shoulders are off the ground. I would rather see your elbows be just a little bit bent than elbows super straight and shoulders off the ground. If you can keep your arms straight and shoulders flat, that's great too. Or even imagining like you're holding on to one of those great big exercise balls between the legs and between the arms. So keeping all of that stuff engaged, and we'll just take a couple deep breaths here. Through the back of that body again. So like I'm dragging those lungs down, pulling those lungs down towards the kidneys, down through the lower back, even down through the pelvis, imagining like they're reaching that far. Legs should be nice and relaxed. And if you're new to this, you're probably really feeling those legs about now. The quadriceps try to do a lot of work for that core from time to time. We'll try 5 more breaths here. So again, pelvic floor, sides of the waist, ribs in, shoulders down, chin tucked, neck is long. And then under control, keep those muscles active as you bring those legs down. Relax those arms. Maybe a little windshield wiper here for a second, or just hold those legs in. Give it a little rock. Maybe a little stretch here. Whatever feels good for you. Just let it go for a second. So now we're going to do a little bit of work with the breath. And to start with, we'll just be in a nice comfy position. I do encourage you to keep those legs bent or have a little bolster underneath you, particularly if you have a big curve in your lower back, because we do want to feel that spine resting down just a little bit more today. Kind of helps with that focus on the breath coming through the back. And we're going to bring ourselves into something called three-part breathing. So take a couple moments and just tune into that breath, engaging it down through the back of the body. And then what I'll get you to do is imagine those lungs are like a jar, a vessel. And we're going to be breathing in 3 stages. So we breathe in to fill the bottom third, short pause, breathe in again to fill the middle third, short pause, breathe in again to fill them all the way up, and then we'll exhale, let it all the way out. Inhale bottom, inhale the middle, inhale, fill them up, exhale, release it all. And try not to force it, okay? Maybe the first couple breaths you find you've overfilled the lungs. In a couple breaths, you will find a nice little rhythm. We don't want to be forcing that last third. We'll keep it going for a few more breaths. Again, filling it up through the back of the body, but staying nice and relaxed in those shoulders here. You may notice you're able to get those lungs filled with a little more breath. This technique is really good for helping to expand the lung capacity. And so as long as you're comfortable with that 3-part inhale, take a short pause at the top and then go for a 3-part exhale. So from the inhale, we're going to fill the bottom third, pause, middle third, pause, top of the lungs, pause, exhale that top, pause, exhale the middle third, pause, exhale that lower third, pause, and start again with the 3 parts. And as you're working with that breath, try to keep that body relaxed. I find my face gets a little tense, my brow, my jaw, or the tops of my shoulders get a little tense, especially on that inhale. And as I exhale, everything softens again. Do your best to stay as soft as you can through the body, on the breath in and the breath out. Through that 3-part inhale, 3-part exhale. Go for one more cycle of that 3-part breath. And after that last cycle, just let that breath come back to something a little more natural for a moment. Relax that body, relax that mind. Maybe pull those legs up, move it around a bit. And then we will engage those cores again. We will pull up that pelvic floor. We'll fire up the sides of the waist. We'll pull those ribs down, shoulders away from the ears, chin tucked, top of the head nice and long. We're going to bring ourselves back up into that 3-month position. Now, if you're, again, new to this, and your body gets fatigued, if those legs really start to shake, if that lower back gets tender, bring the legs down. Keep that engagement though. Just take a little rest for those legs before pulling them back up. But we're going to bring ourselves into that 3-part breath, and we'll just start with the 3-part inhale and a nice exhale. So again, using all of that stuff, or at least 1 or 2 of those elements that either stand out for you, or if you're practiced with this, are a challenge for you. 3-part inhale through that back of the body. And then let it all go. But keep those muscles engaged. Keep that pelvic floor engaged. Those legs soft. Keep those shoulders heavy, nice and wide. Keep that neck long. Now, if you need a break for those legs, go ahead and bring them down. But now we're going to add that 3-part exhale. So hips relaxed, let those shins get heavy, let those quads stay relaxed. 3-part on the way in, bottom third, middle third, top third, short pause, exhale, top third, middle third, bottom third, pause, and repeat. We'll keep that breath going, a couple more cycles. Again, if you need to rest those legs down, you can do that, but keep that activation through that midsection as you're breathing. Three more cycles. One cleansing breath, a good full inhale. Nice and strong as you exhale, let those legs come down. Relax it for a moment, side to side, or pull them in, or stretch it right out. Maybe a little hip raise if that feels good for you, a little bridge pose. Just do what that body needs to do for a moment. Maybe a little happy baby. Whatever you need. Bring that back to a more natural breath for a couple seconds. Alrighty. So again, you can keep those legs bent. You can grab a bolster. Coming back to a little bit of breath. And we're going to work our way to a little bit of breath suspension on that exhale and on the inhale, using a little bit of counting here, a 4-count breath. And that doesn't have to be 4 seconds, it can be whatever, but just so that you have a little bit of a metronome in that mind. So as we're resting down, breathing into the count of 4, so something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and breathing out 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out 1, 2, 3, 4. Now find a rhythm that works for you. If my counting is a little slow or a little fast for you, find a pace that works for you. And there doesn't have to be a pause. We want this to be a nice continuous breath. It's not quite like the last exercise. A full breath in. All we're doing is counting those intervals. And a full breath out without straining. So we're not trying to expand our lungs to the maximum and trying to force all of the air out. It feels natural. And staying relaxed as that breath flows. Shoulders are soft, face is soft, hands and feet are relaxed. And still breathing into that back body, remember, expanding out to the sides of the rib cage, expanding down into the lower back. Still feeling the rise and fall in the front, but coaxing that breath through the back body. And I guess this is the willpower as well, keeping that mind focused on that count of the breath. Keeping that mind focused on expanding through the back body. And so as you're breathing, we're now going to add a pause on that exhale. So as we count in for 4, we count out for 4. We're going to suspend for the count of 2 after that exhale, and then breathing in again. So count of 4 on the way in, and count of 4 on the way out. Holding those lungs empty for a count of 2, and then in again. One more cycle of breath like that. And now we're going to add a suspension on that in-breath as well. And we'll stick to 2. So breathing in for that count of 4. Holding those lungs full for the count of 2. Breathing out for that count of 4. Holding those lungs empty for the count of 2. In again, 4. Suspending them full for 2. Out for the count of 4. Empty for the count of 2. And a few cycles like that. Again, breathing through that back body. And if you're feeling comfortable with that, we will extend those suspensions to the count of 4. So 4 or square breathing. Inhaling for 4. Stay full for that count of 4. Exhale for the count of 4. Empty for the count of 4. And repeat. 2 more cycles like that. Breathing into that back body. And then relax that effort. Let that breath come back to something more natural. Move that body around a little bit. And as you reflect on that exercise, I don't know about you, there's always areas in my body that want to tense up. My right shoulder on that breath in, it wants to curl in like it's trying to help or something. And as I breathe out, I can feel myself really softening that area. So just check in with these next natural breaths to those areas that wanted to get tight. And try to let yourself, feel them stay nice and soft as you're taking those more natural breaths. And then we work that breath suspension up in our 3-month position. So pulling those legs up, knees nice and wide, engaging all of those core muscles again. So pelvic floor, sides of the waist, ribs pulled down, shoulders away from the ears, nice and flat on that floor, chin tucked in a little bit, that crown of the head nice and long, arms in the air. Inhaling for 4, exhaling for 4, no pause quite yet. But the reason we're doing this one is to pay attention to when you find it easiest to keep those core muscles engaged on that breath in or on that breath out. And everyone is a little bit different. For me, I find the breath out helps me to keep everything engaged, with the exception of my pelvic floor. That area wants to release as I breathe out. I need to keep a little more focus to make sure that those pelvic floor muscles are lifted without tensing my hips. So 4 on the way in, 4 on the way out. When do you find it easiest to keep that core engaged? And again, that full 3-dimensional breath. Then if you need to rest those legs down, you can. If not, keep that breath flowing. Or even if you do have to rest those legs down, keep that 4-part breath flowing. Keep that midsection engaged. And then we'll go for that suspension. So 4 on the way in. We'll try for a suspension of 2 at the top, 4 on the way out, 2 at the bottom. And then if you're able to do that suspension of 2, try to extend it to 4. So 4 on the way in, suspending for the count of 4, 4 on the way out, suspending empty for the count of 4. Legs relaxed, shoulders relaxed, but that core working. Spine nice and flat. Try for a couple more rounds of breath. We'll finish this off with 5. If you need to rest those legs down for a moment, try to keep that engagement. But 5 more cycles of that squared off breathing. 4 on the way in. Pause for 4 with those lungs full. 4 on the way out. Pause for 4 with those lungs empty. 4 more rounds. Shoulders heavy and flat. Hips and legs relaxed. With that torso working. That chin tucked. Pelvic floor lifted. Ribs pulled down. Sides of the waist pushed out. Breathing into the back. Face relaxed. Mine is getting all crunched up. And then keep that core engaged. 1 more breath in, nice and full. And as you exhale, under control, bring those legs down. Relax those arms down. And maybe a little bit of movement side to side there. Or stretch it out. Maybe a little bridge pose for a moment to stretch those quads and hip flexors. Oh, whatever that body needs for just a second. Excuse me. And when you are ready, you can give those legs another little shake. But we're going to bring ourselves back up into our 3-month position. And get a little bit of movement going here. So still steady through the midsection. Let your breath flow however it's going to flow. As yoga people, we can sometimes get into that habit of thinking, okay, I breathe in with this movement, breathe out with that movement. We want to just let ourselves breathe. Because again, these systems were built off of watching babies and toddlers learn how to use their core. And they're not thinking, okay, when I stretch here, I breathe in. When I stretch there, I breathe out. They're just letting their breath flow. So try to let that breath flow as naturally as you can. Still relatively deep, not forcing it. Still breathing into the sides of the body and down into the back body as well. We're going to bring those legs up, those arms up, steady through the middle, and starting first by moving those arms around. So maybe just a little bit of a reach over the head. Shoulder blades should still stay relatively flat. And then letting those arms move maybe a little more organically. Letting that breath flow organically. Maybe you're reaching both arms over without rolling the body. So you'll notice my torso is still relatively steady. All I'm doing is moving those arms around. Actually, I'm going to get rid of my pillow here. Just letting those arms move as organically as you want. Making some circles, but steady through the rest of the body. Now, if you need to rest those legs down, go ahead, but try to keep that engagement through the midsection. Take a couple breaths. And when you're ready to bring those legs back up, go ahead and do so. And now we're going to get those legs moving. So again, steady through that midsection. My back is still nice and flat. Now, as the legs move farther away from the body, it will be more difficult to keep that spine flat. There's more resistance. So just keeping that knee bent and letting that foot come towards the floor is perfectly fine. If you find holding everything steady here to be not much of a challenge, you can reach those legs right out. You can reach both of them down, which will be more resistance. You can do a little bicycle type thing. Steady though. I'm not rocking and rolling. My spine is nice and still. You can bring those legs wide. You can bring them in together. You can press them up. You can make circles with those knees. I can't make really big ones or else my spine is going to roll, and we don't want that too much quite yet. Just letting those legs move wherever they're going to go. Kind of like a baby on their back. Maybe trying to get your toes into your mouth. Just let those legs go. Again, if you need to rest those legs down for a second, go ahead. Keep that breath moving. Keep that core engaged. Now we're going to get those arms and legs moving at the same time. And again, you can move opposite. You can stretch everything out. Bring it back to the center. Again, like a baby on their back. Maybe playing with your little mobile. Letting those legs go all over the place, but steady through that core. Long through the neck. Shoulders are down and nice and flat, even though the arms are moving. Ribs are pulled in. Lower back is nice and flat, even though those legs are moving. Pelvic floor is lifted. Body is still breathing. Some good full breaths into that back. And as many more movements as you want to get through here. And then when you're ready, bring it back to the center or with the legs down if you need that rest. Take 3 more breaths, keeping the core engaged. And then with that next breath out, let those legs come down under control. Move them side to side if you need. Pull them into the chest if you like. Arch that back a little bit or come into a bridge if you want. Stretch those quads out. Do what that body needs to do. And a couple breaths. Just let it go for a moment. Let all that effort go. And then, to finish off, you're going to get through just a little bit of movement for that spine. We've been in one position for a bit. So come on to hands and knees or into a little child's pose for just a moment. Oh, good stretch there. And coming up onto all fours. Maybe grab that little pillow for under the knees if you need it. A little blanket. Now, still thinking a bit about that wide waist, pelvic floor lifted. We don't want shoulders all up. We want them pulled away from the ears. We don't want them too far squeezed together. We don't want them too rounded. We want them nice and wide, just like when we were on the floor, except we don't have anything on the spine to give us that feedback. So we have to pay a little closer attention to how it feels from the inside. Chin tucked just a bit. Now still being aware of that core, we are getting some movement happening through the body, so we're really kind of pressing that solar plexus, those ribs out and away here this time. And then we're going to pull those ribs in and round that tail, tuck that chin, and back and forth. Inhaling, maybe lifting that chin, letting those ribs come out. Exhaling to round it out, or whatever breath works best for you. Maybe you prefer the exhale here. And maybe you prefer the inhale here. We'll get through a couple more cat and cows. And again, shoulders away from those ears, even as you round it out. Try not to let the shoulders come up to the ears here. We want them pulled down a little bit. And then we're going to let that body move in whatever direction it wants to move. And you can imagine kind of like you are stuck in a great big peanut butter jar or honey jar or Nutella jar, something you're not allergic to. And we want to get all the last little tasty bits off of that jar. So using your torso to kind of scrape the sides of it, using your hips to get down to the bottom of that jar, using your head to clean everything up through the top. But letting that body move, just letting that breath happen. So a little bit of awareness on those core muscles here, but letting things move a little bit more. So we don't have to keep those ribs tucked right in, but maybe we still keep that waist nice and wide. the chin, the neck, and everything is going to move, but we keep those shoulders away from the ears, even though we're moving through them. We try to keep that pelvic floor lifted. And we keep that breath flowing through the back of the body. And then finally we come back into our little reach with those arms. Maybe resting the forehead on the back of those hands, or what I like to do sometimes with my child's pose is get nice and wide through the knees. Let my chest come forwards and let my hands come in between my knees. And I'll put my right hand on the sole of my left foot and the left hand on the sole of my right foot. Balancing out left and right hemispheres of the brain, left and right sides of the body. Balancing that yang and yin. Just taking a few breaths here. And then we'll bring those arms back out again. And walk the hands off to one side of the mat. Just get a little gentle stretch for that side body. Underneath those shoulders, underneath those armpits. And keep that breath moving into that side body and between those ribs. One more in and out. And we'll inhale it back to the center and exhale, walking to the other side. And one more cycle of breath. And then we bring those hands back to the center. Maybe one last little stretch here. And then we'll bring that body up into a seated position, maybe sitting on a little pillow or on your little blanket if you need that extra lift for that back. And just a couple neck circles here. So still thinking a bit about that core, pelvic floor, waist, those ribs pulled in, and that can give you a really nice long spine, nice long seated posture. And chin tucking down, opening up through the side of the neck. And as the head comes back, don't think so much about really pulling the back of the head to the shoulders. Think more about that chin kind of lifting up and away, and then bringing it back down. Now, if you have a hard time with the head back, bring that head around to the front, stretching the side, and then back around again. But if you can make complete circles, go ahead and do that. Keep those shoulders nice and relaxed. Keep that spine nice and long. Keep that breath moving, not just in the front, through the back body. And we'll switch directions with that head and neck, other way. And if there are any spots that are really liking that stretch, you can stop. Just let it stretch there for a moment. Then we'll bring that head back to center, taking a couple breaths. And to finish up that practice, I'm going to leave that up to you. You can spend a couple moments in seated meditation for a little bit, maybe thinking about what exercising your willpower might mean for you today. Maybe coming down into a Shavasana or supported Shavasana. Whatever your body, whatever your mind feels it needs today. I want to thank you for tuning in and coming along with me with that little exploration of the core. I will bring my hands to heart center in gratitude. Namaste.